girls, men, women, children, people of all kinds, whoever you are, everyone's welcomed in this dojo. It's your boy Peter here, aka Peter Freakout 10, baby, bringing you guys our episode of the Movie Review Show, where the good movies are always reviewed. Alright, back into our movie review. And continuing with the Scream series, since we reviewed the first, only makes sense to talk about the sequel, Scream 2. But how does it fare when compared to the first? Well, grab your dry Ghostface costume after you got the blood cleaned off, sharpen those knives, and let's talk Scream 2, baby. Now, what's crazy about Scream 2 is the fact that this was made in the year 1997, only a year after the first one, and it's directed once again by Wes Craven, with Kevin Williamson returning to the writing chair. Now, going back to the critical success that Scream was, when that was a massive hit, Miramax, of course, saw franchise potential and brought Kevin Williamson back to write the script. But Kevin was already ahead of the game, as remember that whole story I told you about where I talked about how he wrote the script based on a serial killer he heard about? Well, as he was writing the script for the original, he already had ideas written up for a sequel. Miramax also pursued Wes with a 2-picture contract to direct 2 and 3, of which he accepted, even though at first he was a bit hesitant as he didn't want this franchise to define his directing resume and felt like he would be missing other big opportunities to direct other films. In fact, there was a period of time when Robert Rodriguez, who was in consideration to direct the original, was in the running to take his place. Meanwhile, Miramax approved of the script and gave the film a budget of $24 million, a much higher budget than that of the first, which was $15 million. And they got their cast together, a lot of which came back from the original. And production was both good and bad. As the good side was that they started shooting in Atlanta, Georgia, with some locations being shot in LA, with some of the sorority houses being shot in Malibu, California. The bad side, though, was while the film was being shot, when Kevin transferred the script over the net to the studio, someone found the script and leaked it to the internet and gave out the killer's reveal. This meant that a lot of extensive rewrites had to be done on set while the cameras were rolling, and on top of that, a lot of the actors couldn't see the final page of the script till later, some even having to go as far as to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Making things harder was the fact that Miramax was pushing this film for a Christmas season release only a year after the first. This made it a really tough shoot. Along with that, K&B were brought back in to handle the effects, and shooting lasted for a period of 9 weeks. And then it was time for Wes to face his biggest enemy in the horror industry, more so than Ghostface or Freddy Krueger, Horace Pinker, or the parents and the people under the stairs. The MPAA, a group of which he had already fought making the first movie, of which this time he fooled by sending them a less violent version of this film and had to go through 8 cuts before he submitted it. Surprisingly, on the first try, they awarded the film an R rating to the more violent cut. And its release had the huge advantage because the studio was worried that around the time Tomorrow It Never Dies, the James Bond movie, was coming out, along with Titanic, which both of their release dates got moved to give the film the advantage of being ahead of them. And I know that there was a lot of marketing for this film, with the women in this movie appearing in a magazine ad. And the movie opened on December 12th, 1997. And because of the fan base that grew because of the first, that helped it get into the #1 spot. It made more in its opening weekend than the first, with the final gross being over $101 million, which, while less than the first, was still a good profit considering the film's budget. What this did do better with was the reception, as the film received positive reviews from critics, as on Rotten Tomatoes it has an 83%, a much higher rating than that of the first. In fact, it's the highest rated film of the trilogy. Critics praised the film for taking what worked in the first one and applying it to sequels. And they also praised it for the directing, the film's horror and comedic moments, which they felt were still intact from the original. Hell, Gene Siskel, who even didn't like the first, had nice things to say about this film on Siskel and Ebert, and actually gave it a thumbs up. Roger Ebert especially gave it a positive reviews despite his criticism of the film's violence, which was also played into the fact that there was the death of a certain character that I'll talk about when I get into cons. And for some, they also had a problem with, because it's a sequel, it's not as original as the original. However, I think the audience side is more mixed, as on that side is a 59%, and on IMDb it is a 6.3 out of 10. So I think the sites have their own people speaking for it. And like the first, it was nominated for various awards, some of which it did win. And because of its success, they moved along to Scream 3. Now, right off the bat, I want to say this. I know that the Scream sequels have the fan base divided down the middle in terms of who does and who doesn't like them. But I'm going to be completely honest. As someone who never held the original in high regard until recently, I remember when this was coming out, everybody was going nuts that this was coming. Oh, Scream 2 sequel, yay, the original was so great. Me, I had just saw I Know What You Did Last Summer, and I was on the side of the people who liked that film, even though it was a small side of people who liked that film more, and later Urban Legend. And with both of those opinions, people thought I was crazy. That being said, I still liked the film, but I just didn't grow into liking it till recently. But with the sequel and how nuts everybody was going over it, I figured why not check it out, as I like to be surprised, as I thought there could be something fun, even if it might be retreading the same ground that the first one did. And there's some sequels that do improve on the original in the horror industry and are more remembered. And because this was Wes's first sequel, not counting New Nightmares, I don't really see that as a sequel. I just see it as a spin-off of Nightmare on Elm Street and more of a, I don't want to say parody, because calling it parody is a little harsh, but more of the precursor to this, I should say, whereas a sequel continues the story. And I have to say, when I first saw this, I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. And I'll sit here and say there is a huge part of me that likes this more than the original. And of the two movies, this is the one that I found myself watching the most. And even after growing respect for the first one and seeing all three, I still think of the three, this is my favorite. Even though now I like them all, I find myself gravitating towards this one and 3. 3 is my second favorite because I just think this one has a lot going for it. I agree with Gene Siskel in his review and the nice things he had to say. I'll get deeper into that later. But it surprises me also that this one has the mixed reception that it has. Because for the longest time, after this came out, a lot of people really seem to like this one. A lot of people say it's their favorite of the 3. So it surprises me reading deeper that this one and the 3 have such a divide in people's opinions. I think that was also because of 3, and it made people look back at this one and kind of be like, oh, I don't know about this anymore. But I don't agree. I definitely think this is a solid sequel that I think has a lot going for it than I think people are willing to admit. And those that like it kind of got what it was going for. I'll explain why later, though. But getting into the cast with this film, with the cast, a lot of the actors and actresses from the first reprised their roles, such as Neve Campbell, Courteney Cox, David Arquette, Jamie Kennedy, and Roger L. Jackson as the voice of Ghostface. But they're accompanied by a host of new people such as Sarah Michelle Gellar from TV's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and a couple months before this she was in I Know What You Did Last Summer. Elise Neal from Money Talks. Liev Schreiber, who I forgot to mention in the first, he actually had a small role as Cotton Weary, Sidney's murderer, who he also reprises his roles as in this. He was also in films like Phantoms with Ben Affleck, Sphere, The Hurricane with Denzel Washington and Jacob the Liar. You also have Laurie Metcalf from TV's Roseanne. She was in Uncle Buck. She's the woman who was putting the moves on John Candy before Amy Madigan walked in. She was also Andy's mom in Toy Story and Toy Story 2, which I didn't know till recently. I'm like, holy shit, she was Andy's mom? Wow. You also have Timothy Oliphant from Go, which I loved. I gotta review that sometime. Jerry O'Connell from Stand By Me. He was also on the TV show Sliders and Joe's Apartment. Louis Arquette is also in this from The Great Outdoors. Stuart Saves His Family. He was also in Almost Heroes with Chris Farley. And you have a lot of cameos and small roles. So a pretty stacked cast this time. Now, the plot of Scream 2 is, it's basically been 2 years since the events of the first one, and Sidney, played once again by Neve Campbell, along with Randy, played once again by Jamie Kennedy, have gone off to college, and they're trying to put the past beside them, with Cindy getting to act in a play and finding a new boyfriend, played by Jerry O'Connell. All the while, the media has been profiting from the events of the first one, with Gail, played once again by Courteney Cox, having written a book based on the events of the first, and Hollywood has turned the whole incident into a franchise with Stab. However, out of nowhere, someone appears on the campus as a copycat killer and starts killing victims that bear some similarity to the victims in the first one. This reunites Sidney with Gail and Dewey, played once again by David Arquette, but this time they're joined by Cotton Weary, played by Liev Schreiber, who Gail invites down to get a story out of the two reuniting. So now with the bodies piling up, they need to figure out who this killer is once again and protect Sidney. All the while, Sidney, who's still dealing with the trauma from the first, starts to once again suspect that because Billy in the first was the killer, now it could be her new boyfriend doing the killing. So, like the first, it's up to Gail and Dewey, as well as Sidney, to figure out who's doing these killings, all the while Sidney herself finds herself dealing with reuniting with Cotton, as well as the trauma of seeing him again. Will Sidney be able to survive a second round of murder, or will her death lead to her being written out of the third installment? I think what makes Scream 2 for me at the time the one that I found myself gravitating towards the most is because while I feel like the movie does continue the meta commentary we saw in the first, it's not as in your face with it as before, and that could be because the film was thrust into production at the last minute to get a franchise going, and because they had to do a lot of last minute reworkings to the script as it pretty much got leaked online while the cameras were rolling. I think Kevin had his hands tied behind his back and really had to rush the script and couldn't refine it to make the commentary as good as it was in the first one. To other people, I have my own thoughts on it, but I also kind of see it as Kevin looking at it like, you know what, I can't do better than what I did with one. I'm not going to strike lightning again with this amount of time that I have to write the script, so I'm going to be a little bit more upfront with a straightforward slasher. But with that said, it does sort of feel like it has the spirit with the commentary in this one that the first one did so well with. I like the fact that this one pivots more towards a commentary on sequels and how there's moviegoers that aren't willing to admit that there are sequels that outdo the original, which I like because there are those who do seem to forget that there are those sequels that are really good and do outdo the original. I like that classroom scene where they're talking about sequels and Randy's like, what sequels are there that are better than the original? And they start listing Aliens, Terminator 2, and Godfather Part 2. One person even says House 2, the second story. And I like that. I really liked that scene. I really liked how it sets up this commentary. And I also like the scene where Randy and Dewey are talking, and you realize this is where Randy's right, as there are sequels that run with the rule that we're gonna go bigger, badder, and better than the first and try and really build upon what the first one did so well with. And I like these scenes and I like that commentary, as I felt it helped set the sequel apart from the original and gave it something new to be meta with. But I also like how the sequel continues Sidney's story, because here you see her dealing with the aftermath of the first and how she's trying to move on with her life. She's trying to get a new life going at college with her being in a play, and also getting a new boyfriend, and how people have taken the events from the first and are using it for profit, with the Stab movie being based around that aspect of the events of the first, and Gail making a book out of it, which does go against her arc in the first, because in the first you kind of realize that she decided to put all that aside and go and help someone. I don't know why they decided to throw that arc away with her, but it just made me dislike her in this one. I mean, she's not bad acting-wise, and she does have her moments, but I really don't like how the film went back on her arc there. But I like the message of that. I like the fact that the film touches upon that aspect, as there are assholes in life who are like that. I like that the film explores that and how the media will take that and profit off it. I also like the college setting. I thought it was something different for the sequel in terms of location. Granted, it's not used to its full potential, and it's more likely used as a backdrop, and a year later, Urban Legend would do the same thing, and I thought that did the college setting a lot better. But I appreciate the change in location, and I like the fact that the killer is a copycat killer this time, and is killing students whose names bear a bit of resemblance to the victims in the first one. I thought it was an interesting way for Kevin to get around the fact that there is a killer on camp and Ghostface is returning, because it's not like Jason or Freddy where you can have them rise above the grave. With that said, some aspects of the script do feel a bit rough. And that may be because of the last-minute revisions that Wes and Kevin had to deal with. Regardless, they do hinder particular aspects of the script, especially when it comes to Cotton and how he's woven into the film. And what should be an essential part of the film, especially with Sidney coming face-to-face with the man who she thought was her mother's killer, is really not given the depth that it needs, especially when he's barely in the film and he keeps popping in and out to try and confront Sidney. And the film expects us to have this emotional connection with him, but it doesn't work because it doesn't feel like there's any sense of development with him, and the film doesn't go out of its way to show that development, instead telling us. And when you see his ending when he comes in, it's like, where did that come from? There's also some aspects that I feel, because the script was rewritten, the characters were meant for specific places, and then when it was rewritten, it was just rewritten for a cheap shock, especially with Randy and how he's killed. It seemed like they were going to have him be a bigger part in the script, but his death, and I don't need to put the spoiler here because it's been widely talked about with this film all over the forum, and it's the one thing everybody is mad about, and for as much as I like this film, I really understand why, because his death just feels like it was done for a cheap shock, and it also kind of shows that Randy has kind of gone back on what he taught people in the first one about being on guard and surviving a horror film, and that the killer could be anywhere, and it's just a waste of his character. And the huge reveal of who the killer is, which made the first one work so well, isn't as good here, as it isn't as surprising or shocking as the first, because it just felt like they were trying to do the two killers thing again, and it just wasn't as well formulated here, because the original script, spoiler, which never happened, Cotton was actually supposed to be the killer, and I think because that got leaked, they had to remove his scenes, which maybe did have the character development to them. But regardless, I still don't like how it's done here. I think the banter that the two killers have, it isn't as memorable as Stu and Billy's scenes. And it just, I don't know, it didn't work. If Cotton was the killer, I think that would have been interesting. And if it didn't get leaked online, you had his character development there, I think it would have made those scenes work. It's one of those things that the first one did so well with that isn't as well here. But overall, I feel for what little time Kevin had, I thought the story was well done. I'll say, though, on a technical side, the directing is still great here, despite Wes having to go all hands on deck and hold on to the ship as shit was going down. His directing for this film is really solid. This doesn't feel like a rushed movie because the budget is definitely on the screen, more so in this one than it was in the first. The energy in his directing from the first is still intact. There's not as many tricks with the directing here like there was in the first, like Ghostface reflecting in the principal's eyes or the zoom in edit on Drew Barrymore on the tree. But I still think he's got a great hand on the camera with Patrick Lussier in terms of movement and placement of the camera. There's some great shots, and give the film its tense moments, like the chase with Gale through the auditorium and just the movement of the camera as she's running through it and opening doors that are locked. I like the shot where she's in that booth, like the soundproof booth, and there's this shot where it's like this wall that's like this and she's in between the walls and the camera's placed in the middle there, sort of like the walls are closing in on her. Or even the opening, which I'd argue is probably the best opening of the three films. I like the idea of it in a movie theater and his use of lighting in those moments and just the use of close-ups and the editing and what Wes was able to get out of the actors in that moment, Jada Pinkett especially, and how he uses the directing to get across how immersed people are with this movie, and they seem to think, even though she was stabbed right as the movie was going on, they think she's putting on an act. And the shot of her on top of the theater screen screaming for help, I thought that was a really disturbing shot. And I also think that he still gets some great comedic timing out of the cast, particularly Jamie and Jerry O'Connell. There's still that energy from the two, and while it doesn't feel as improvised on Jamie's end as it does in the first, I still think there's a chuckle here and there from him. But probably, I think where his directing really outshines the first is the moments with Ghostface and his kills. I think he does a better job in this movie showcasing the brutality and the viciousness of the kills, especially in the editing, providing some shots that also showcase the grisly aftermath, like Jamie's death especially. Despite me hating that death, I don't hate how it was directed because it wasn't Wes's fault that that went through. And I like there's some cool creative notices despite not being as unique as they were in the first. There's still a cool one here and there, like in the mirror outside as everyone's walking by and they think someone's having sex in the van and but it's really Randy getting killed. I like the shot of the knife in the mirror. And it helps too because the kills are a bit more creative this time, and I think that allowed Wes to get a bit more creative with the directing and how they're done. And while I do wish Wes had more time to get more creative with the film, and I think if he had the time, he would have allowed him to explore more areas of getting creative with his directing outside of the kills. That being said, I respect the fact that he buckled down and gave an admirable job directing the film, considering the time limit that he had. And it's not just the theater scene. I also think he gets some solid acting out of the crew here. Neve Campbell does a great job getting back into the role of Sidney. I still think she maintains that likable, cute girl next door side that she had in the first. But I do like how this movie expands her arc a bit more and kind of adds to the scar side that she endured in the first. Like the fact that she has a bit more of a tough girl side to her that makes her kind of not afraid to make her voice be heard, like the scene where Gale brings back Cotton, and while she's scared, she has no issue punching Gale in the face again. And I also like the fact that she's a bit smarter in this one, and she has a bit of a side to her that questions maybe aspects going on right now may mirror what happened in the first film, like her new boyfriend, and that she thinks the same thing may be happening again, so there's that sense of intelligence to her. Especially in the final, I like the line that she gives where they're talking about Billy, and he goes, "There's one thing you forgot about Billy. I fucking killed him." That's why I feel like the character had a bit more of a fighter side in her, and I like how she works off that in this one. And I think she does a great job getting into the physicality of the role, especially the final on the stage where she's running through the stage and running through the gears and doing all that stuff. If there was a stunt double, they did a great job hiding it. But for what Neve was able to do, I think she does great in this. So, once again, Neve Campbell does great in this movie. Courteney Cox, despite me not liking her character and where they take her and how she kind of goes back on her arc from the first, I think Courteney does a great job here. I do think this time she does get a little bit more of a center stage here. Same thing with David Arquette. And she does well for what's given. But there are some areas where it does feel held back with her, especially because I feel like they're repeating her arc again from the first. And I feel like it doesn't make her arc stand out as much as it could have. And I think that more could have been done with her as opposed to what's done here. But for the fact that she's going for more of the center stage, she does well for what she's given. And I think it helps that not only does she have more to do, but David Arquette has more to do as well. And I think when she has David Arquette to play off, I think that's where her role really excels. Which David Arquette, as I said, does a great job. I appreciate that they brought him back and they didn't kill him off. And I also like that he has a little bit more center stage here, which is why I also love Scream 3 as well, because he's practically the main lead of the film. Even though Sidney's there, David has his time to shine along with Courteney, which that's one thing I'll say about Scream 3 when I get to the review. But I appreciate here he has more to do and is more involved with the horror, that scene especially in the auditorium. I do find it insane, though, that in that scene, they have no issue having sex while looking through the videos or getting ready to have sex while they're in the auditorium. I'm like, are we really getting horny now? That was just insane. But David does well. That scene where he's trying to get her attention through the soundproof glass and he's getting beat to death and stabbed and still comes out, or the moment when they're running through the campus checking everyone's phone to find out who's Ghostface as Randy keeps him on the phone. I also like that the movie expands on their relationship set up in the first, and I think because they're a thing, I think it makes their relationship feel real and authentic. Jamie Kennedy, despite the fact that I don't like where they go with his character and it's not as improvised as it was in the first, his performance wasn't bad. His call with Ghostface had me dying. Billy Loomis, what the fuck? What a no-good homo-erect mama's boy. You want to set your goals high? You want to be one of the big boys? That had me dying, and just Jamie's delivery in that moment really made his role go out with a bang. Roger L. Jackson, of course, does a great job as Ghostface. He still gives him that same scratchy, haunting voice he gave him in the first and does a great job playing him here. In terms of new characters, you have Jerry O'Connell as Sidney's new boyfriend, who I like because it's Jerry O'Connell, and I like him as an actor. Seems like a lovable guy in real life. And I liked him in this movie. I know a lot of people hate the "I think I love you, isn't that what love is made of" scene. I didn't mind it for what they were going for. That's where I kind of got the idea that he wasn't the killer. I thought he had a really likable side that really made you feel sorry that he had to split from Sidney and giving her the necklace that wins her back. And I even liked the final scene where he tells Sidney, "I would never hurt you." I thought it really gave Jerry a chance to work with dramatic stuff, and I thought he did well here. And I thought it was a great way to really make the audience know he's not the killer, and it makes him go out sad. Liev Schreiber, his performance is all right. They really don't give him much to do. He just pops in and out, and for what he does, he's fine. It's Liev Schreiber, and I do think he has done better than these films. But for what he had to do, I thought he did fine for what he was given. Besides that, other actors, you got Timothy Olyphant as the student Mickey, who is a student in Randy's class. And he does well for what he's given. I like Timothy Olyphant as an actor. And while I don't like, because spoiler, I'm going to put a spoiler warning up. He is the killer, along with the next person I'm about to talk about. And while it's not a bad idea and it gives Timothy a chance to stretch his acting wings. I think because of the fact that he's not in the film as a central focus really makes his reveal a bit underwhelming. I did like the other one, though. Despite that aspect being underwhelming, the next one as well, I do like the idea behind it, that being the next one with Laurie Metcalf, who also does very good in her role, and you find out a bit about her, that she's also the killer, as I like the fact that she's basically this reporter who poses to get answers out of Gale, and you find out that she's Billy Loomis's mother. That I found really surprising. But they don't really do it as well as the first, like I said. I think because Timothy and Laurie don't share the screen presence that Matthew and Skeet did. But for what they did fine. But besides those two, Rebecca Gayheart and Porta de Rossi as a couple of sorority sisters, they're fine. I did prefer Rebecca, an urban legend. I definitely felt she had more to do there. Here, she's just there. Jada Pinkett, despite the fact that she seems like an insufferable bitch in real life, she doesn't do bad here. I like the line when she's watching the film and she goes, "Bitch, hang the phone up and star 69 his ass." That had me dying. Same with Omar Epps. He's just the dumbass boyfriend who gets killed. Sarah Michelle Gellar as another one of the sisters. She's fine for what she's given. I'd probably say I also liked her more, and I Know What You Did Last Summer. I know, like the first, Wes has a cameo here as a doctor just walking by Sidney. Not as memorable as his cameo in the first where he was the janitor. Besides that, you have little roles from people in the movie world, like Luke Wilson is the movie version of Billy. What's her face? Tori Spelling is the movie version of Sidney, and Heather Graham's like the movie version of Drew Barrymore in the first one. I know Kevin Williamson's a talk show host in the movie. But for what they're given, overall, the acting is really good. And while cutting away aspects of the scripts harms the actors' chances of really kind of evolving their characters, their acting is not the problem. And besides that, just like the first, the effects are still top-notch. The mask and the costumes still look great in this film. Like the first, it's definitely a bloody movie. And I'll admit, like I said, I think the kills of this one are a bit more creative. While you do have the stabbing like the first, you do have some that I do feel stick out a bit more in this one. I like the death with Cece where she's chased up the building and her sorority house and Ghostface throws her off the balcony. There's another death where Ghostface makes this car crash and this guy gets a pole through his head. Great usage of practical effects by K&B. I didn't notice any CGI. If there was, they did a good job hiding it. But yeah, all in all, even after gaining some respect from the first, I still find myself liking this sequel a tiny bit more than the first. I already went over its flaws, so there's no use in repeating myself. So let's just jump right into the bottom line. Because while Scream 2 has some areas that some people may find to be a bit of a step backwards from what worked in the first, I do feel it's a solid sequel that serves up more Ghostface for the viewers and will leave the viewer happy. And yeah, if you like the first, I highly recommend you check out Scream 2. If you were annoyed by the first and the meta-ness of the first one, I do feel this sequel scales that back, and I think will make those who were annoyed with the first a welcome entrance. So either way, I think a lot of people are going to get a kick out of this movie. So when it comes down to it, the final rating for Scream 2 is a 9 out of 10. And it deserves it. It therefore gets the Alexandra seal of approval. Definitely, I think, probably my favorite Scream move. And definitely the one that I find myself rewatching the most. But yeah, you'll be surprised to hear my thoughts on 3 when we get to that as well. So yeah, if I pissed off any Scream fans, sorry. But yeah, that aside, that is my review for Scream 2. I will get the Scream 3 review going. But next time, I do have reviews coming of Road to El Dorado. I'm going to work on the Turok 2 review soon. Going to have to start filming that and editing it. I am working on my review of Pokemon, the first movie. That's been off. I'm still writing up aspects of that. But this will definitely be coming, so be on the lookout for that. And I also have a review coming of Romeo Must Die. And I have a few films I plan to check out soon that'll be coming. But for right now, I'll see you guys later. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of Scream 2. Did you guys like it more than the first? Is this your favorite Scream? What's your favorite Scream? I'd love to know you guys' thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.